Hi, my name's Kirsten and I wanted to do a video today talking about the journey I've had since starting my PhD on my channel, which is not really an official channel. I just make videos that I think might be useful. Previously did one on doing my part-time masters, and I thought, why not talk about my experience with PhD so far, give some sort of pointers on what I think you need as someone doing a PhD, and sort of the pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages of doing a PhD. So I'll start off with a little bit about myself to begin with, and then go into sort of those factors and what I think you need and what's the good and bad of doing a PhD. So a bit about me. I'm Kirsten, I'm 26. I'm now halfway through my PhD, so I'm approaching my sort of second year. I'm based in Swansea University in the UK, so PhDs are 3 years, well, you're funded for 3 years for your PhD. And obviously as an English person, I am a UK citizen in doing a UK-based PhD. So there might be some things that are very different for people if you're an international or you're not doing it in the UK, but the UK traditionally you have funding for 3 years, and that is essentially where you're paid. So my PhD is part funded by Swansea University and part funded by England Rugby, as you can see. So my PhD is looking at essentially sort of talent development environments, particularly in English women's rugby. So the elite women's rugby pathway, how do we make it better, essentially, is the easiest way to describe it. And I was never looking for a PhD. So my perspective is, I guess, a bit different. I know some people really want to do PhDs, set their goal on it, set their sights on it. For me, I was the first in my family to go to university, did a master's because I really just loved it. I went to Loughborough University as my undergrad and master's. For a bit of background, because it might be interesting for some people, I did a sports psychology undergrad, a sport management master's, and then my PhD is sports psychology. So obviously relevant undergrad, but it was more so, and I'll get onto this in terms of, are you the right person? Have you got the right skills and the attributes? I had a massive involvement in rugby all throughout my life. So I played rugby my whole life, which is obviously what my PhD is based on. Did a sports psychology undergrad, but changed to sport management because I like the more governance-y elements. And that those gave me the qualifications that I needed to do a PhD, alongside having a really quite significant sort of portfolio on volunteering within rugby. So that's sort of my background. Was never going to do a PhD, saw this one directly after my master's finish, and I knew it was made for me, so I applied. If people are interested, I can go a bit more into the application process, what that entailed, what it looked like. But yeah, never looking for a PhD, found something that I thought was amazing and really, really interesting, and applied for it and got it. And that's where I am now. So I'm about halfway through my PhD. And I absolutely love it. So I'm really lucky to do this full time as my full-time job and get paid for it. And it's very applied. So, and this is something I'll get onto again about the pros and cons. It's very, very different. Each PhD, you'll chat to people, they're all incredibly, incredibly different. So that's about me, but I'll go into what I think sort of you need to know before going into a PhD, and some things that I've really loved and some things that could have been better. So what are some of the benefits or things that I've loved about doing a PhD? So the number one thing is I've loved it. I've really enjoyed it. It's essentially like doing one module or one topic from university that you love and doing it full time as your job. You're essentially like the CEO or the project manager of your own sort of project, and I absolutely love that. The absolute freedom that comes with it. Day 9 to 5 or whatever hours you want to work, you essentially just do something that you really enjoy and have an interest in, and that for me is like such a privilege. You don't realise that's such a privilege. So that's the number one sort of benefit, I would say, that enjoyment element and getting to do something every day that not only you love but has an impact or potential for impact. Secondly, as I sort of alluded to, the flexibility. So you don't have to work a 9 to 5 job, and obviously, like I said, PhDs do differ between people and supervisors and what they want from you, but I largely make my own schedule. I work when I want to what suits me best in terms of getting the work done. and things like data collection as well. So you have a lot of flexibility, but when you have data collection and you need to interview participants or things like that, that's when you don't make your own schedule, and that's when you sort of have to, you're dictated by when other people are available. But largely I work when I want, and I think that's fantastic. Again, it's such a privilege. It gets the best out of me because I'm not, again, working this 9-to-5 job where I might be doing 4 hours work but be sat there for 8 hours because I'm not being productive. Sometimes if I'm not being productive, I leave the office, I go home, I work from a cafe, I take a few hours break, I go for a walk. I'm not having anyone sort of watching me or clocking me in, which again might be different from supervisors, which I'll speak about. But yeah, I absolutely love that. And a lot of people do have that flexibility to make their own hours. And you're not sort of, you don't have to book holiday or anything like that. Again, supervisor dependent, but you have like 30 days holiday, I think what the new rules are. So it's essentially like being a university student doing one module in terms of flexibility. The third sort of pro I would say is the pay, and this also could be a con for some people. So the pay, I think people have this perception that PhD students are paid terribly, and they're really, really not. So essentially the pay for me as a UK based sort of student is around £1,500, like tax free, right? So you get £1,500 in the bank every month. That's yours, which I think is actually pretty reasonable. I know some people don't think it's reasonable because you are, like I said, the CEO of your own project. So you are working whatever hours that you need to work to get stuff done. But for me, I also teach alongside of it, and that might be something that's available to you. You need to work that out with your university. But some months I can get over £2,000 with teaching included. So I can get about £300 to £500 a month extra when I'm teaching, which is really good. I get paid about £13 an hour, which might vary for universities. But that I think is fantastic pay. Like, I don't think that's something to snub at. It translates to about £30,000 a year salary if you're including tax. So I think that's really reasonable. And you get things like expenses as well. So that's not coming out of that £1,500 a month. You get a set budget for expenses and for travel, etc. So £1,500 a month is really reasonable. It's very livable, particularly in Swansea. It might be a consideration if you're living in a big city like London or, Edinburgh, for example, or outside of the UK. And finally, I would say one of the biggest benefits as well are the skills that a PhD gives you. Firstly, it's essentially like doing a massive project, so it gives you fantastic project management skills, networking, communication, developing really crucial skills that I think are incredibly valuable and are valued by employers. Things like teaching, I've now got my Associate Fellow, which essentially is just a qualification sort of recognising my ability to teach. And that's something that I think is a massive benefit of PhDs, is that because of that flexibility, you can really develop skills in other areas, and you're not just, your job opportunities aren't just dictated by your PhD itself. You can go into teaching, you can help learn on equipment and different statistics and methods. So you could go into different areas. Lots of people go into I&D or R&D. They go into like data scientist jobs, or they might just go into being lab technicians, right? So you can have jobs at universities being a lecturer for your teaching, but then you could go into a private consultancy business as well. So I love that applied element. For me, I work with my funder, England Rugby, and for me, I see myself working in rugby, and having that applied role is really helping develop those relationships, and hopefully means that I might be able to get a job in the future in rugby, but I have options in teaching or staying in academia as well. So what are the cons? So the cons are very linked to some of the pros, depending on who you are as a person, your background, and things like that. So one of the cons is firstly the finances and expenses. You may perceive the finances you get not very much for the amount of hours you're putting in, and that's fair enough. That's your own perception. And this links to expenses as well. So like I said, you get set budget for expenses. However, when you're doing expenses, it can be a bit of a hassle. And again, this may be institution-wide, but you may find that you're paying things out of your own pocket, because it can be very, very admin-y to get that money back. So if you're paying for train tickets or going to conferences, you may not be able to have the time to put it through your expenses team. So you have to pay for it out of your own budget, which has always been a bit of a struggle for me because I'm paying off my master's debts, for example. But yeah, I don't personally perceive the finances that much of an issue. But I say this as someone that's gone from undergrad to masters to university. So if you're someone who's a bit more mature, or someone that's just been in, working a regular job, you may earn significantly more than what you would get from a PhD. And I guess that's what you need to work out. And I think a lot of people do get into that position where they decide, should I go into a job and actually earn way more? Or should I come out of a job where I earn more to earn significantly less? And I guess it comes back to your reason why. And that's something I'll speak about later, but you need to figure out whether a PhD is for you. And if finances are a real concern, then, is 1,500 enough to sustain you? Do you want more money, essentially? So another one of the cons as well is what I alluded to with sort of being a CEO of your own project, right? You're like a project manager of your own sort of PhD, and your supervisors are sort of like the consultants that might check up on it. So this boils down to having more responsibility. You are the one who is responsible for getting the PhD done. If you need help, they're there, but ultimately this is a whole journey for you. So doing a PhD is for you to upskill, to learn, and to turn into a really good researcher, right? So that means a lot of anything that goes wrong in your PhD is your responsibility. And I know that sounds like quite a common sense thing to say, but I have to work it out. And that might be something that puts a lot of people off, or they perceive PhDs as being very 50-50. Your supervisor, your first year is very much 50-50, but going forward it's 70-30, 80-20, where you're responsible for any hiccups or anything that needs to be done. And that can mean that you go from working, a couple of hours a day getting stuff done, to then if you can't figure something out, you may spend hours and hours on the same problem, a stats problem, or trying to figure out a model. I know lots of the people that do sort of modelling and data and stuff like that can spend hours to figure something out, and it's ultimately down to you. You're the ones that are going to be doing the viva, you're the ones that are getting the PhD, so therefore you're the one that has to figure it out, which can be very, very challenging. So you need to be able to work as a group, but independently as well. And that also links to the fact that I said about it's very flexible when you develop your own schedule, largely, for the most part. And that may be a massive turn off for a lot of people, or you may not be someone well suited to a PhD. Some people, I know supervisors want them in for specific times, and again, that's its own challenge. But for me, I love having a schedule. So going into my PhD, I had to really quickly develop a routine, because I largely had days where I didn't have anything planned, didn't have meetings, didn't have data collection. And you could ultimately, if you've not figured out a schedule or way of working that suits you, you could sit there and procrastinate or not get things done because you don't have that like university schedule. It's not dictated by the people. Again, you're the CEO. You need to get the work done. So you need an ability to sit down and plan your week, which I know sounds like common sense again. But sometimes on the flip side, you might have weeks full of meetings, full of data collection, interviews and things like that, or whatever quantitative researchers do. And so you need to be able to compartmentalise, develop your schedule to what works for you, and really understand, and sort of having a bit of tough love on yourself that you need to get stuff done. So you're not going to have a 9-to-5 schedule, and I know some people may struggle with that. And I guess from that as well, like I said, if there's an issue that you need to solve, you can go to your supervisors, but ultimately no PhD is the same. And I really struggled with this when I first started, because I had so many questions and so many things that I didn't know. There was no PhD guidebook. There's no one telling you, oh, this is how it works, or this is where you go to for this. Going to a new university in itself is challenging, because they have whole different systems and how things work, and you then have this new PhD and way of working that you need to figure out. And there's no guidebook telling you, and it's taken me a good 1.5 years, 2 years to understand how everything works in a PhD and how I sort of go about my day-to-day life. And the final con, and some people probably argue is the biggest con, is supervisors. And for me, I really get on with my supervisor, absolutely love her. And I'm not saying that because she might see it. Some people have terrible, terrible experiences with supervisors. And it's because they're essentially your line manager, right? So you're like the CEO of your own project, but they are a consultant, or they're on the board of your project type thing. And a lot of people have terrible relationships with their supervisors because they're controlling, or They want you to work in a certain way that doesn't agree with how you like to work. And essentially, they are the most important person that you will have in your PhD. They're the ones that will give you guidance and help you. And those problems that you have, they're the ones that you can go to as well. Some supervisors want to be very hands-on. Some just let you go. And again, depending on how you like to work, that could be really good or really bad. I have a fantastic relationship with my supervisor. And I'll go into what I think is really important. And like I said, some sort of considerations of whether you're right for a PhD. Some of the considerations when you're going into this is that you need to be able to be honest. And I think that's massive for any PhD supervisor relationship. So yeah, I'll go into now what I think you need as a PhD student. And this is my opinion and my perspective. So other people might be very different, and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts. But what I think you need or need to be aware of before you go into a PhD.